So I recently decided to get back into game development, and I figured there was no better way to get back into it than to join a game jam. So I decided to join a game jam over this last 4th of July weekend. You know, that weekend where most people eat a lot of barbecue and blow stuff up. I decided to sit inside all weekend and work on a game. I decided to join the Game Developers League 32. It was a game jam where a whole bunch of developers would come together and make a game based around a soon-to-be-announced theme in 72 hours. At the end of the 72 hours, all of the developers would rate all the games, and whoever had the best ratings at the end will win. I've entered previous jams before. My first one I entered was back in 2019 for this weekly jam. I created a short game based off the theme 5 Minute Hero. I made a game called 5 Minute Theater, where you're just kind of this block dude shooting other block things. There's a little boss fight at the end. And another game jam I entered right before I made my comic 100 Years Later was the Brackies Game Jam. I made a small little game called Peaceville, where you're this little boy running around the town trying to save it from its ultimate destruction of the power plant exploding. The theme was rewind, so after the power plant would explode, it would rewind and reset the day. And you would have to do various tasks for villagers to kind of be able to get to the key for the power plant, so then you could stop from exploding, I guess, somehow. Didn't really think too much about that. You needed the key to open it, and that would beat the game. Now, the game jams, they're always super stressful and really time-consuming. So why do I do it? Why do a lot of people do it? For me, it's really fun to start a new small project and try to complete it as soon as I can. You also end up learning a lot from whatever game engine you're using, and a whole lot from game design, typically. You kind of learn what works and what doesn't really fast, and you can kind of see that from other entries as well. But probably the main reason I do game jams is to make a small project and actually complete it, to actually finish it. That's a big issue I have, and I think a lot of other creative people have as well. I mean, if I had a nickel for all the unfinished products I have, I wouldn't really be rich per se, but I could probably buy like a new TV or something. And that Thursday night, they announced the jam theme. And they announced the theme to be Size Matters. Now, I didn't really care for the theme. I couldn't really think of anything. I had a couple ideas. One was where you were part of this kind of like Knights Guild, and you and some fellow guildmates were in a contest to see who could kill the biggest monster in the same amount of time. Another idea was like you're at a fair with your girlfriend or significant other, and they wanted the biggest prize for one of those game booth things, and you had to get that. Or however big the prize you got is how much they owe you, or how many points you got. I don't know, something like that. Ultimately, I just decided on a really basic idea of 2 characters, one big, one small, and kind of a top-down puzzle game where you would switch between the characters. And the large character, the original idea was the large character would like push boxes or push things out of the way or be like a fighter. And the small character would kind of go in smaller areas that the larger character wouldn't be able to have access to. And then just kind of build puzzles all around that. So with that idea, I started developing the game that Thursday night. I originally decided to use the game engine Godot. I decided to check it out since it seems like everyone has been talking about that for a while, and I kind of want to see what all the hype was about it. So before the jam, I actually looked into it a little bit and kind of messed around in it. And honestly, I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed. It's really good. The big thing that really sold me is the file management system. The one thing I hate about Unity is if you ever try to organize your files and folders, if you don't do it in a certain way, you could really end up breaking your game. I've done that a couple times, and it also just takes a long time for whatever reason, even if you're really not moving that much stuff. In Godot, you just do it. It takes no time, and you can pretty much move them wherever you want, and it's smart enough to know where everything still is. The other thing I really liked was all the add-ons you can get that are also just all free since it's an open source program. One I found was called Dialogic, and it's a quick, fast way to add kind of visual novel-esque cutscenes to your game. And it's kind of crazy it was free. I kind of use a similar program in Unity called LDC, Local Dialogue Cutscenes. That's a paid asset. I think it's like $70-$80, which isn't a bad price for it. But this free asset and this free game engine is already better than that. So if you ever were thinking about making a visual novel, I would just say get Godot, get Dialogic, and there you go. You'd be able to make a visual novel really fast and easy, honestly. And honestly, if you're just new to game dev in general and you don't know which engine to start learning, I would just say start with Godot. So anyway, I was gonna try to learn Godot, and that Thursday night I just got a basic movement script for my characters, and I even decided to do some really simple concept art for them. I decided the large character would be a large goblin girl called Get, and then the small character would be a small fairy called Put. And then I was going to call the game Get and Put. It's a really super creative title, I know. I then spent most of the rest of the night trying to figure out a script on how to swap between the characters smoothly and just in general, and I really couldn't figure it out. So I tried to go to sleep since I had to go to work early that morning for whatever reason. I tried to go to bed, but I couldn't really fall asleep. I was thinking of all the other ideas I could do, and I was also thinking about how I probably should just use Unity for making this game. I've had a lot more experience in that, and there's a visual scripting program called Playmaker that I really like when making game jams. It's super easy to use. It's not great for maybe bigger projects, as some stuff can break and more complex stuff turns into spaghetti, as where it would just be a couple lines in C#. But for game jams, it's perfect. And I have a bunch of 3D models I could use, so I wouldn't have to worry about the art too much. I do really like Godot, and I do plan to use it in the future, but probably a lot of my projects kind of moving forward are going to be using Unity since I am most familiar with that. I was finally able to fall asleep and got a couple hours in before I had to wake up to go to work. I got ready and I biked to work that morning. I recently just got this new job about 6 months ago, and about a month ago I actually moved really close to it, so I can bike and walk there. It's been really sweet, and I've been saving a lot of money not having to buy a car, and I get to borrow my brother's car every now and then too. I got to work around 3 and quickly headed home. I created the new Unity project, made a simple test scene, imported the character concept art, made a movement controller for them, and made a way to switch between the characters really easily. And all of that took about 30 minutes to complete. And I had spent hours trying to do that in Godot the previous night. I then crashed super hard because I had only had a couple hours of sleep the previous night. Sleep is super important. You got to make sure to keep your body rested. I'm usually pretty good about it, but sometimes I get a little excited and can't fall asleep some nights. I recently learned about the best way to sleep efficiently and to make it so when you wake up you actually feel sort of refreshed instead of all groggy and gross. It's something with like your body goes in certain cycles and with like REM and deep sleep. I won't pretend to know anything about that, but what I do know is that cycle takes about 90 minutes or an hour and a half. So really you just need to sleep in 90-minute increments. For me personally, when I have to go to work the next day, I try to get 6 hours. So I set my alarm for about 6 hours and 10 minutes. The 10 extra minutes giving me time to fall asleep. And if you ever want to take a nap, which I usually do during some days, you try to just take an hour and a half nap. So anyway, I woke up from the nap, super refreshed and ready to work on the game. I worked on the first floor of the dungeon and a system for the players to walk through the door and make it so when one player would walk through the door, the camera would switch to the other player, and once that character walked through the door, they would both move on to the next level. I then worked on the second floor of the game. I tried to figure out the pushing box physics, and I got it to work. The only issue is the other character would be able to push it as well. I tried a whole bunch of different things, but even in theory, the fairy shouldn't have been able to even like interact with the boxes at all, but even that wasn't working. So ultimately, I just gave up and made it so only the fairy could go through the small space to hit a lever. Once hitting that lever, it would open up a gate, and they would be able to proceed to the next level. I then made the third floor on it, which there is a laser that only the goblin Get could walk through. I then added some other stuff to the first floor to kind of give it a little bit more of an atmosphere and some ambiance. And then after that, I called it a night. I then woke up early that Saturday with only less than 48 hours to finish. I thankfully didn't have to work this Saturday, so I figured I was going to spend most of the day working on the game. I spent most of the morning working on a switch to turn off the lasers and kind of duplicating the lasers so they would turn on and off in other areas. And then I also worked on the art for the fairy Put. I decided to go super basic for him as I didn't want to spend too much time on the art, as I was going to have to do a lot of different poses for him. and I just did 4 directions for him. I also noticed that my concept art will use my regular thin lines for when I draw, and it didn't really register very well, even in full screen in the game. So I used these thicker black lines just so you can see the character a little bit clearer. At least for this kind of style of game, I think it is going to be better to learn how to use these kind of black outline styles more. And it's making me realize why a lot of games are just pixel art, or why most games that aren't pixel art have this kind of thick outline style. I wasn't super happy with how he turned out, as I'm not quite used to this kind of newer style, but I did finish him, and I implemented him into the game. I then streamed later that night. When streaming, I noticed I was going to have to make a lot of frames for her character, and I didn't really have the time to do all of them. So at the very least, I did a basic side shot and 2 frames in a running animation. It looks super janky and weird, and I said if I had enough time, I would just go back and add a couple more frames and maybe even do the front and back animations. Spoiler, I didn't. The rest of the night, I kind of just hung out with all the viewers. The big highlight of that stream was a user named Operator Jack, and he kept asking all these like weird hypothetical questions.
If you could change what falls from the sky every time it rains, what would it be and why? I would originally say money, but that would cause a big inflation problem. What are 3 things you could buy at a grocery store to make the cashier give you a weird look?
And he always would type /E in front of everything he said. And he was there for mostly the entire stream. So a big shout out to Operator. Also during that stream, I worked on the cutscene system, and I had all the cutscenes for the first 3 floors at the end of that stream. I do plan to keep streaming in the future, and I might even stream even more than usual, but I'll probably start doing that on Twitch, as I don't really want to bog down this channel too much with streams. But I do plan to stream every other Friday, either making a game or just working on some art, or maybe just hanging out with you guys. So do come by and say hello sometime. I then woke up early that Sunday, the 4th of July, aka America's birthday. I finished making the final floor of the game. I added some sound effects for the switches. I then also added some kind of ambient music in the background to kind of give it a more dungeon feel. And I added a super basic main menu. I then did some bug testing and submitted the game. The game jam didn't end till 8 p.m. that night, but unfortunately I did have to work that day. It sucked I had to work that day since most of my family was having a party, eating good food, and blowing stuff up. But on the bright side, I was getting time and a half at my job, so I didn't care too much. And with all that, the game was finished. You can check it out in the link in the description down below. All in all, this experience was really fun, and I learned a whole lot, and I definitely plan on doing it again. But can I say that I made a good game? Definitely not. I think the game is pretty bad, actually. I wasn't able to add a lot of the things I wanted to add, and honestly, it's really just like a tutorial for a game that doesn't exist. It kind of plays more like a interactive visual novel, which is fine. I have nothing against those, but the story isn't long enough or good enough to kind of say it's a good game in that regard. But all in all, I had fun, and I learned I definitely need to keep managing my expectations, and I need to start making smaller projects. I also thought that I could go back and kind of finish up a lot of the animations and make the game a little bit longer, but ultimately I decided I'm not going to do that. Because the whole point of this was to make something and finish it. While some people could argue that it isn't finished, I would say it is. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So yeah, it is finished. And again, I haven't really finished many projects, so I'm probably just going to leave it as is and say it's a finished project and not look back. And really, I think a lot of these game jams for me personally is to learn on how to finish a project and how to actually do the things that you don't normally do when working on something. And once you make these smaller projects, you can slowly make bigger and bigger projects, but finishing them is the important part. It's advice that a lot of people give to starting out creators, in that you should start small and slowly work your way to make bigger projects. It's advice I have always heard. It's advice I'm giving now. I had never just followed that advice. I always thought I was special and different. I was very wrong. Make smaller projects. If this devlog was like a kid's TV show where there's like a little life lesson at the end of it, it would be to manage your expectations and start smaller projects before you start your large, huge dream project. Because most people can't do that. Some people can, but they're crazy. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you think about this devlog and the game in general. And let me know what you want to see in the future in regards to devlogs or just kind of games I make. I also want to thank everyone for being super supportive for the decision of me making games and kind of documenting them here on the channel. You guys seriously rock, and I hope to make some really cool content in the future. So thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you guys around.